Most financial progress doesn't come from big moves or urgent decisions. It comes from a small number of ideas that you understand early and apply consistently. So things like your habits, your environment, your timing, all of these matter as much as your budgets and investments do. In this video, I'll be sharing some of the greatest lessons that have changed how I think about money and finances. Let's get right into it. The first thing is that not all money advice applies to your season of life. It sounds very obvious and self-explanatory, but I know many people who fall into a lot of self-destructive patterns because they're trying to apply money advice that really doesn't apply to their current stage or life situation. Let's take, for example, if you're deciding between building up your savings and aggressively paying down debt, the approach you would follow really depends on different factors. Things like how much debt are we talking about? What are the current job market realities like? What's the economy like? What are your savings goals? These are factors that will decide what kind of money advice you would follow. Second and very common example is the decision between renting or buying. You'd often hear people say that buying a home is always better than renting. But renting has its pros, for example, it can provide the flexibility that might be valuable to you at certain stages of your life. For example, when your income is constantly changing or you're fresh out of college, you're starting a new career, renting can be beneficial. So if you go ahead and listen to someone who is hampering on about buying a house and buying a house, you might run into trouble. So just remember that not all money advice applies to your current season in life. The next lesson is that money is as emotional as it is financial. So things like stress, shame, your upbringing, all drive your relationship with money. If money decisions were purely logical, of course, managing money is going to be easy for so many people. But unfortunately, that's just not the case. And you'd find that sometimes, even when you know the right thing to do, things like fear or peer pressure or comparison drive our choices and our decisions much more than logic and the actual numbers do. The third is that no matter how good you are with budgeting, you cannot budget your way out of a low income. A budget is a very, very useful tool because it can help you manage your income and manage what you have. Unfortunately, a budget alone is not enough to create the margin where wealth exists if you simply do not have enough coming in. So think about a budget as something that gives you control, but your income is actually what determines how much progress is possible. Now let's look at a practical example. In one scenario, we have a person who makes about $40,000 a year and has a monthly take-home pay of about $2,650. If their budget includes things like rent and utilities, food, transportation, insurance, phone, miscellaneous, and all of these expenses come to a total of about $2,450 a month, this person would only have about $200 left at the end of the month to save or invest. And over the course of 12 months, only be able to save or invest about $2,400 if they're saving everything that they have left over at the end of the month. However, let's look at a second person who earns a bit more, so right around $60,000, but has the same living expenses. This person would have a take-home pay of about $3,900 a month with the same expenses of $2,450 a month. This person is going to be left with a whopping $1,450 at the end of the month to save and invest. And of course, if you multiply that out by 12 months in a year, the second person is going to have $17,400 more to save or invest in a year. So this is just to show you a very practical example that even when you have the right tools and you know how to budget, your income really does make a difference. In this example, the person in scenario B is going to be able to save or invest over 7 times more than the person in scenario A. So I hope this example has been able to emphasize how important it is to try to increase your income as much as you can, because you really cannot budget your way out of a low income. Speaking of income, the next lesson I would like to discuss is the fact that a high income will not save you from bad habits. But if you lack discipline and you have little or very poor financial education, a high income is not going to save you from your bad habits. If you're an overspender, if you're prone to lifestyle creep, a high income is only going to exacerbate these habits that you have. So a high income would not necessarily save you from your bad habits. It would only amplify them. If you're liking this video so far, please hit that like button. It really does help me and supports this channel. The next thing is that no one cares about protecting your money as much as you do. No one. And this applies to your employers, your bank, or your financial advisors. And I'm not saying that these people are not important. Of course they are. Your banks, your employers, and your advisors all have roles to play in your financial life, but none of them actually experience the outcomes of your financial decisions the way that you do. Remember that your employer's priority is to maximize profit and shareholder value, not to make sure that you're making the most money possible. And your bank's priority is to make money from you, either in fees or in interest. None of these people care about protecting your money. So it's ultimately your responsibility to ensure that your income, your savings, and your investment are increasing and they're also in a healthy state. The next point is that being good with money doesn't mean that you never enjoy your money. If anything, actually, over restriction leads to burnout and binge spending. So, if your financial plan is one that leaves no room for enjoyment, highly unlikely that you stick to it long term. But think about the fact that sustainability matters more than short term perfection. So, the goal isn't spending without limits. The goal is to ensure that you're choosing your enjoyment on purpose and you're spending in ways that align with your values rather than on impulse or based on comparison. Next lesson is that your environment affects your finances way more than your willpower. And when I talk about finances, I'm talking here about your income, your spending, your investing, your lifestyle norms. Let's think about income, for example. Exposure to certain skills, roles, or jobs matter more than motivation ever will. You cannot earn a living from something that just doesn't exist in your world. On the other hand, being in an environment where people negotiate their pay or talk very openly about growth tends to lead to an increase in your own standards as well. On the spending side, what you see around you typically sets a baseline for what you consider normal spending, right? So if you're surrounded by the high flyers of society, people who like to spend, 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 that's what you're going to internalize as what is normal to spend. And being surrounded by people like this unconsciously might even pressure you into doing the same. And this isn't just people in your physical environment. This could be people on social media as well. So if you're constantly exposed to people who live a lavish lifestyle and that's not what you're trying to do, you might be internalizing some of those things. The next lesson is that your first investments do not need to be perfect. It's much more important to start investing than trying to optimize things very early on. You build the muscle of investing by doing. So instead of agonizing about how to start and making sure that you have the perfect strategy and all of this, just start. If you're confused about where to start, check out my video linked on the screen on how to invest your first $100 or $1,000. And just remember that you build the investing muscle by doing and you just learn by starting. If you actually never start, there's no way you'd wake up one day and automatically feel confident. That confidence comes by doing, by practicing over time. The ninth lesson is that compound interest works both ways. Here's what I mean. Compound interest just compounds either in the positive or in the negative. Doesn't really care if it's helping or hurting you. It's just doing its thing, right? So over time, it magnifies whatever path it is that you're on. So when your money is invested, growth just compounds quietly over time, working in your favor. But when money is borrowed or you're in a lot of debt, compound interest works in the same way, just in the opposite direction, and it hurts you. So with compound interest, the math is the same, it's just the direction that's different. And the final lesson here is that you will eventually pay for what you ignore. The thing about most financial decisions is they don't have immediate consequences, which can make it easy for you to postpone them. And the unfortunate thing about money and personal finances is that ignoring something often means meeting it later, sometime in the future, but under less flexible or palatable circumstances. So make sure you're not ignoring the important things in your financial life. I'm curious to hear from you. Which of these lessons stood out the most to you for where you are right now in your financial life? Or is there a money lesson that you've learned over the course of your lifetime that you're willing to share with others? These conversations help people much more than we tend to realize. And of course, if you like this video, please hit that like button. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already, because if you really like thoughtful conversations about growth, money, personal finance, you will feel right at home here. So please join the growing community. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video.